Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This incident happened when I was 25 and it still makes my blood boil thinking about it. The only place actively hiring at the time was this small retail store downtown. Both my older sister and younger brother applied there since jobs were scarce. My sister had worked in retail for 6 years, managing customer service at different stores before moving back home. My brother, on the other hand, had only worked at a factory for a year before quitting because he didn't get a raise. Even though the employees who got raises had been there for over 5 years, he'd spent the months since then living at home, constantly complaining about how unfair the job market was while barely looking for work. We were at the mall one afternoon when my sister's phone rang. The store owner wanted her to come in for an interview the next day. Her face lit up with excitement, but that happiness didn't last long. My brother immediately started complaining, saying it was garbage that she got an interview when he had applied a whole week before her. When my sister suggested they might still be reviewing applications, he cut her off, reminding everyone that he had even called to follow up. He kept insisting it wasn't fair, his voice getting louder and drawing attention from other shoppers. I tried explaining that they probably wanted someone with experience since she had worked in retail before. My brother wouldn't listen and argued that the timing of applications should matter more than experience, insisting that applying first meant he should be interviewed first. His face was getting red, and I could see our sister shrinking into herself, trying to make herself smaller. When I explained that's not how job applications work, and that they pick the most qualified candidates first, he got even more upset. He started accusing the store of being sexist, claiming the owner must discriminate against men. His voice echoed through the mall corridor, making several people turn to stare at us. Our dad made things worse by telling my sister she needed to mention our brother during her interview. My sister had to explain that she couldn't do that because it would be unprofessional, especially since she hadn't even gotten the job yet. I could see tears forming in her eyes, though she was trying hard to hold them back. My brother kept going on about how all the employees there were women, using it as proof of discrimination. He demanded that she tell them to hire him too. I watched my sister's excitement fade away, as she had to defend herself for simply being qualified. She kept fidgeting with her phone, probably wishing she'd never received the call in front of everyone. I finally snapped and told them both to stop. I explained that she got the interview because of her years of experience, not because she was a woman. I made it clear that she wasn't going to compromise her interview by pushing to hire someone they had already rejected, and if they wanted to interview him, they would have called. My hands were shaking with anger, but I kept my voice steady. The car ride home was silent, but my brother wasn't done. He went straight to our mom when we got home, trying to get her on his side. But this time, Mom surprised everyone. She had been in the middle of preparing dinner but put down her knife and turned to face him with an expression I'd never seen before. She told him straight out that if he wanted more job opportunities, maybe he shouldn't have quit his last job over not getting a raise after only 1 year. She pointed out that our sister had worked hard for her experience and reminded him that he wasn't entitled to a job just because he applied first. The wooden spoon in her hand punctuated each word as she spoke. When he tried to argue back, Mom shut him down completely. She warned him that if he gave our sister any more grief over this, he could start looking for apartments too, because at 23 he was old enough to stand on his own 2 feet instead of complaining about things being unfair. The threat of having to pay his own rent finally seemed to get through to him. My sister got the job, and within 6 months, she was promoted to assistant manager. She ended up completely reorganizing the store's inventory system and increasing their sales by 15%. My brother eventually found work at another factory, but this time he stuck with it, probably realizing that experience actually does matter more than just being first in line. Though he never apologized for his behavior, the look on his face when our sister got her promotion was insane. Even better was when she later became his reference for a better job, after he'd finally earned some real work experience of his own. It took him a few years, but he finally learned that entitlement gets you nowhere in life. The first few months driving around my ice cream truck were tough, learning the routes, getting permits, and building a customer base. But seeing the kids' faces light up when they heard my truck's music made it all worth it. I even modified my van to be more eco-friendly and installed a better refrigeration system to keep the ice cream at the perfect temperature. Everything was going great until last weekend. It was an unusually hot Saturday, and I had parked near the community park where a little league baseball game had just finished. The line was longer than usual, about 15 kids with their parents waiting patiently. That's when I heard the commotion. I watched in shock as this kid, probably around 12, started yelling that he wanted ice cream right now while shoving his way through the line, pushing smaller children aside. Some of them fell, and one little girl scraped her knee on the pavement. I called out to him, telling him he needed to wait in line like everyone else. The kid ignored me and kept pushing forward. A parent tried to intervene, telling the boy that he couldn't just push through like that since the other children were there first. The kid shouted back that his mom owned the whole neighborhood and he could do whatever he wanted. Just then, a shiny SUV screeched to a halt next to my van, and out came who I can only describe as Karen incarnate, sunglasses and all. She immediately started demanding to know why her son wasn't being served, claiming he had been waiting forever. I explained to her that her son had just arrived and was pushing other children, telling her he needed to wait his turn. She responded by asking if I knew who she was, bragging about being on the Homeowners Association board. I told her that didn't give her son the right to hurt other children and that he needed to go to the back of the line. She became more aggressive, yelling that her son deserved to be served first because he had just won his baseball game. Another parent spoke up then, correcting her by pointing out that her son's team had actually lost and that he had thrown his bat at the pitcher. Karen snapped at them, saying nobody asked for their input. She turned back to me, her face getting redder by the second, and threatened to have my permit revoked if I didn't serve her son immediately. I apologized but stood my ground, telling her I wouldn't reward bullying behavior and that she needed to either take her son to the back of the line or he wouldn't be served at all. The kid started wailing dramatically, begging his mom to make me give him ice cream. Karen gave me one final chance, demanding that I serve her son right then. I simply said no. Karen stormed back to her SUV, and I thought she was finally leaving. Instead, she started her engine and drove straight into the side of my van. Thank God all the children had scattered away from the line when she started yelling. The impact wasn't enough to tip my van over, but it definitely caused some serious damage. The weird thing is, she didn't stop there. She backed up and looked like she was about to ram my van again when one of the parents, who turned out to be an off-duty police officer, pulled out his badge and weapon, ordering her to stop her vehicle and turn off the engine. Instead of complying, Karen floored it, leaving her own kid behind. She made it about 2 blocks before 3 police cars cornered her. Turns out someone had called the police when she first started threatening me. Her kid was still standing there, crying his eyes out, no longer looking like the tough bully he was just minutes ago. A couple of the parents I knew from my regular route stayed with him until social services arrived. The aftermath was something else. Karen got charged with reckless endangerment, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, property damage, and child abandonment. The responding officers found an open bottle of wine in her cup holder, so she got clapped with a DUI too. Her son got sent to live with his father, who apparently had been trying to get custody for years. He showed up at my van a week later with the kid. The father told me he wanted his son to apologize properly. The kid, looking genuinely remorseful, apologized for pushing everyone and being mean and for the damage to my van. I thanked him, telling him his apology meant a lot. The father then handed me an envelope explaining that it should cover the van repairs and mentioning that he had enrolled his son in counseling. The insurance covered most of the damage, but the father's extra help meant I could upgrade some equipment I'd been saving for. I was back on the road within 2 weeks. Karen ended up getting 3 years in prison, lost her driver's license, and had to pay a massive fine. She also got kicked off the Homeowners Association board. Not that it really mattered since she had to sell her house to pay for all the legal fees. The community really came together after this incident. The local body shop did most of the repairs at cost, and some of the regular parents started a fundraiser to help me stay afloat while the van was being fixed. They said their kids' summers wouldn't be the same without the ice cream truck. I still can't believe someone would risk hurting children over ice cream, but I guess entitlement makes people do crazy things. My cousin and I grew up practically inseparable. We lived just a few blocks away from each other, and being the same age meant we shared pretty much everything, from toys as kids to teenage rebellion phases to now navigating our early 20s together. He was more than just family. He was my best friend. That all changed when he started dating her. From day one, it was clear we weren't going to get along. While I was content with my simple lifestyle, working as a mechanic and spending weekends at local concerts, she was all about status and appearances. Our interactions were always tense, filled with thinly veiled insults and fake pleasantries. But I put up with it for my cousin's sake. When they got engaged after just 8 months of dating, I wasn't surprised. He'd always been the impulsive type, and she'd been pushing for it pretty much since day one. One evening, I stopped by their place before we were supposed to head to a concert together. My cousin was running late, leaving me alone with his fiancée. She immediately launched into showing off their wedding preparations, proud of their ridiculously expensive wedding invitations. When I commented on how pricey they seemed, she proudly told me they were $5 each, insisting that was what you needed to do for a proper wedding. I tried to be practical and told her she could save money by not sending me one since I was obviously coming to the wedding. She looked shocked, as if I'd just insulted her grandmother, and asked if I didn't want to keep the invitation as a keepsake. I explained, probably a bit too bluntly, that I had no intention of keeping it and would throw it away after the wedding like any normal person would. This seemed to offend her even more. She insisted that people save these things as keepsakes, her voice getting increasingly shrill. When I disagreed, she tried to bring my cousin into it, claiming he cared about these things too. I called her bluff, telling her straight up that he was only pretending to care because of her. Thankfully, my cousin walked in right then, saving us from further argument. But that interaction pretty much summed up our entire relationship. When it came time to buy their wedding gift, I had to visit an actual store since online shopping wasn't really a thing back then. The store offered gift wrapping, and as someone who could barely manage to wrap a box without making it look like it had been mauled by a bear, I jumped at the service. Looking at their wedding-themed wrapping paper options, I had an idea. Instead of choosing one of the 3 identical wedding patterns everyone else would use, I picked out baby-themed paper, complete with tiny rattles on the ribbon. I figured my cousin would appreciate the joke. He knew my sense of humor. The wedding was exactly what you'd expect, over the top and excessive. They went on their honeymoon, and a few days after they returned, my cousin called me. He asked with obvious amusement in his voice how I had known about the pregnancy. Confused, I asked what he meant. That's when he revealed that his wife had stopped taking birth control before the wedding, and they had just discovered she was already 2 months pregnant when they got married. We both burst out laughing when I explained it was just meant to be a joke. His wife predictably was furious about the whole thing. But here's where it gets better. She worked as a drug rehabilitation counselor, and within a year she started an affair with one of her wealthy clients. My cousin divorced her, and she quickly married her new rich boyfriend. That marriage didn't last either. Turns out being wealthy wasn't enough to put up with her attitude. Last month, I ran into my cousin at our local bar. He was having drinks with none other than her second ex-husband. They've actually become good friends, bonding over their shared experience of being married to her. She is working as a lifestyle coach now, living in a small apartment, and still trying to maintain the appearance of wealth she never actually had. Meanwhile, my cousin met a wonderful woman who shares his actual interests, not just his credit card, and they're expecting their second child. I've always been the type of person who loves trying out new clothes and accessories, especially from online stores. The convenience of shopping from my bed is unmatched, but sometimes things don't fit quite right or look different in person. That means I spend a lot of time at my local post office doing returns. I'm 21 now, but I remember the first time I went there when I was 16. I had ordered this gorgeous dress for my first high school dance, but it was 2 sizes too big. My mom was working double shifts at the hospital, so I decided to handle the return myself. Big mistake. The postal worker, this woman probably in her late 50s or early 60s, made me feel like the dumbest person alive. When I politely asked her how to do a return since I'd never done one before, she responded with condescension, asking if I really didn't know how to do a return. When I confirmed it was my first time, she snapped at me about reading the return label, saying everything was there in black and white. The other customers in line were staring and I could feel my face burning red. I was fighting back tears as she practically threw the instructions at me. Despite that experience, I kept going back to that post office because it was the closest one to my house. Every single time I made sure to be extra polite to her, always greeting her with a smile and a friendly greeting. And every single time she acted like customers were the bane of her existence. Fast forward to today. I've been saving up for my first international trip with my college friends, and I needed to get my passport. I decided to get my photo taken first since I wasn't ready to pay for the full passport application yet. I had spent extra time on my makeup that morning, making sure everything was perfect for the photo I'd be stuck with for years. As soon as I walked in, I saw her at the counter. Great. When I requested a passport photo, she immediately asked if I was a first-time applicant. After I confirmed I was, she told me we could just take the photo when I came back to do the application. I explained that I'd like to take the photo today since I'd done my makeup specially for it. She looked me up and down like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. She asked again if I wouldn't rather just wait until I came back, her tone making it clear she thought I was being difficult. When I insisted on doing it today, she let out this dramatic sigh that could probably be heard from the parking lot. Once again, other customers were staring at me like I was being difficult. She called over another worker, and I clearly heard her complain about not understanding these people. That was it. 5 years of putting up with her attitude finally broke me. I told her I'd just go to Walgreens instead. When she protested that she'd already agreed to do it today, I explained that her attitude made it clear this was an inconvenience for her. I pointed out how she always had a nasty attitude, and how I'd been nothing but polite for 5 years, even after she humiliated me when I was 16. I told her plainly that I didn't deserve this treatment, and neither did anyone else who came in there. The other postal worker who she'd called over was standing there with his mouth open. Several customers were nodding in agreement. An elderly customer even spoke up in support of me, mentioning how he'd been coming there for 20 years and had watched her attitude get worse every year. I didn't wait for her response. I walked out with my head held high, went straight to Walgreens for my photo, and drove to the post office in the next city over to submit my passport application. The staff there were lovely, and I didn't mind the extra drive one bit. Word must have gotten around because I heard from my neighbor that the post office received several complaints about her behavior that week. Apparently, my outburst gave others the courage to speak up too. She was transferred to a position in the back away from customer service, and now I do all my postal business at the other location. The extra 15-minute drive is worth it for the peace of mind. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.